I started dating my boyfriend, Jeff, 10 months ago. This relationship has been amazing so far, and I definitely see a future with him. There's just one problem. He has a weird relationship with his ex that's starting to make me really uncomfortable and suspicious. When we started dating, he often talked about his best friend, Jenna, who he also owns a business with. He made it pretty clear that she was an important person to him. I knew they had spent vacations together, and he mentioned hanging out with her parents a few times, too. A few weeks after I met him, I creeped through all his pictures on Facebook, because who doesn't do that with someone they just started dating, and saw a bunch of very couple-wide pictures of him and Jenna. I also found her Instagram and looked through it, and it's filled with pictures of Jeff. A bunch of them had the hashtag relationship goals and other similar things. So in this way, I figured out that they had dated. I kept waiting for him to tell me that himself, but he never did. About 2 months after we started dating, I straight up asked him if he had dated her, and he admitted it. He said that they had met in school and had similar ideals and ambitions. They dated for 9 months and broke up a year and a half ago. I asked him why they'd broken up, and he said their relationship was awful and they worked much better as friends. They started their business after they broke up, and things have, apparently, been going well between them since then. I started to get kind of suspicious about her, though, when time passed and I still hadn't met her. I met his friends and family pretty soon after we started dating, but I didn't meet Jenna. I went to numerous social events that I'd expect her to be at, but she was never there. There were a number of occasions when our paths almost crossed, and I really thought I was going to meet her, but I never did. For example, I went to their office a few times to meet Jeff after work, and Jenna was already gone. Or sometimes I'd come to meet him, and he'd come outside to meet me so I wouldn't have to go inside. Things started to get really weird about 3 months ago. Jeff and Jenna were having an open house night one evening. Jeff came over to my place after work, and we had a few hours to kill before it was time to go. So we went out for dinner and then walked to the office. I was kind of expecting that I'd come in and help them set up, but when we were a block away, he started asking me if I had lots of work to do and saying there was a really nice coffee shop nearby. He actually walked me to the coffee shop and sat me down, then left to go get ready with Jenna. He told me to come to the office in an hour and a half. About half an hour before I left for the office, I texted Jeff and said I hoped everything was going well and asked if there was anything I could do. He replied and said, "Something's come up for Jenna and she can't be here tonight." I was getting really suspicious at this point. I went to the office half an hour later, and sure enough, Jenna wasn't there. People kept asking about her all night, and Jeff told them she'd had a family emergency. When we walked back to the car later that night, he told me what happened. While he and Jenna were getting ready, she had had a panic attack and said she was scared to meet me. She said she wouldn't be able to handle it and either had to leave, or he had to tell me not to come. He told her to leave, so she did. Since then, a couple more weird things have happened, and I still haven't met Jenna. Once, when I was hanging out with Jeff, we went to the office so he could grab something. When we were almost there, he looked at his phone and said, "Jenna's still there. Let's just go for a walk." So we walked around the block for half an hour and then came back when she was gone. After that happened, I told Jeff I felt really uncomfortable with the situation. I could respect that they were friends who had dated, but the way she was acting about me was very suspicious. He apologized and said he had actually been really mad at her, but wasn't sure what to do. He also told me a couple other weird stories about things she'd done. He went to a party a few weeks ago. I didn't go, and his phone had died that night. When he got home and charged his phone, it was full of texts from Jenna saying she was outside in her car and asking if I was there or not. She actually never even ended up going to the party, simply because SHE didn't know if I was there or not. Now here's the kicker. Jeff and Jenna are currently on a 2-week-long camping trip. They've been planning this trip since before I met him, but considering the way she's behaved, I feel very uncomfortable about him being on this trip. I just looked at her Instagram, and she's posted 5 new pictures of him. As awesome as Jeff is, I'm really fed up with this, and I'm seriously considering breaking things off when he gets back. Am I being unreasonable? TLDR, my boyfriend is best friends/business partners with his ex. She has done a number of weird things to avoid meeting me, and I'm so sick of it that I'm considering breaking up with him. Relevant comments. Commenter, you're not being unreasonable at all, and I can understand why you feel so upset about the whole situation. If I were you, I'd be asking Jeff a few questions. Does he know the root issue of why she doesn't want to meet you? Is she like this with anyone else? Explain to him that the situation is upsetting you and that you aren't comfortable with him going on a 2-week vacation with her. She is, after all, his ex-girlfriend, and the whole thing strikes me as a little strange. Maybe you could talk about meeting Jenna with Jeff present in a quieter, mutual place like a cafe or a restaurant. If Jeff was my boyfriend, I'd be looking for answers. Best of luck to you, and please post an update. Opie, it's kind of reassuring to hear that other people don't think I'm being unreasonable. I have actually asked him if he knows why she's being like this, and he says he's asked her the same thing and hasn't gotten a clear answer. He said he's asked her if she still has feelings for him, and she said no. They're actually already on their trip, so there's not much I can do about it at this point. I think I'll try probing him a bit more when he gets back, and see if he might know a bit more than he's telling me about her behavior. Commenter, you're not only not being unreasonable, but you have put up with way more than most other people would have. I would have noped out of there when I found her Instagram and realized he didn't tell you that he had dated her. Not to mention all the crazy over-the-top nonsense she's pulled since. And he is going on a 2-week-long trip with this girl? Oh God, so much nope. Opie, well, I'm glad that at least I'm not the only one who thinks it's weird. I kind of feel like I probably would have called it off already if he wasn't so great in other ways. This is seriously the best relationship I've ever had. But the whole Jenna situation is really over the top. Why wasn't Opie on the camping trip, or why wasn't it canceled? I have to work and I was never invited. As far as why it wasn't canceled, good question. Commenter, I just broke up with my ex last week because of similar behavior. Her ex was super clingy and openly in love with her, and she wanted to stay friends with him. Found out they're going on a vacation together, and I straight up wasn't invited. Confronted her about it, and she refused to accept that it was totally fucked up behavior. So I dumped her. Confront your boyfriend about this when he gets back. Don't tell him he can't be friends with her. Just tell him how it makes you feel. And if he gets defensive or tries to gaslight you, dump his ass. Don't let your so treat you like shit because they're overly protective of an ex. This girl is very clearly still obsessed with your boyfriend, and her intentions cannot be platonic. Maybe your boyfriend is just a dumb idiot and needs to open his eyes. Or maybe you're just second fiddle in his life. Opie, wow, that sounds kind of creepily similar to my situation. I'm sorry to hear about your ex. Sounds like you're better off without her. I have decided to confront him when he gets back. I really need to tell him how all of this makes me feel. I've told him it makes me uncomfortable before, but I guess I haven't said exactly how uncomfortable it makes me. And I'm starting to feel like this camping trip is just unacceptable, partially thanks to all the people that have commented here. And I shouldn't have to put up with stuff like this. Update 1. I wrote my previous post over a year ago, and a lot has happened since then. I wanted to give everyone an update, since the advice on this sub was really helpful at the time. For a few months after I wrote my OP, nothing much happened. Jeff and I continued dating, and he continued being friends/partners with Jenna. I never met her, but everything else in our relationship seemed to be going so well that I decided I'd try to deal with it. Things got really hard, however, when I had to take a work contract 12 hours away from home for 3 months. I hardly saw Jeff the whole time, and I looked at Jenna's Instagram almost every day to see if she posted more photos of them together. More often than not, she had. Since I wasn't physically present, I felt like Jenna was his real girlfriend. I felt completely worthless and constantly stressed out, knowing my boyfriend was spending all his time with another woman who I already had suspicions about. While I was away for work, I decided to break up with Jeff. I broke up with as soon as I came back, and I made it very clear that his relationship with Jenna was intolerable for me. I told him he was going to have a hard time dating anyone who wasn't her as long as she was still in his life. He kept saying he didn't understand why it was such a problem. He told me he couldn't control her behavior, but he promised me he hadn't cheated on me. I explained to him that by allowing their friendship to continue, he was condoning her behavior. I told him I didn't really even care if he'd physically cheated or not, since he'd already shown disrespect for me and our relationship. I didn't speak to him for a few months, and I went on with my life. I took another contract out of town and even considered moving permanently to another city. One night, though, Jeff called me and apologized. He said he had been thinking about our relationship a lot and realized he had been in the wrong. He said his relationship with Jenna was beginning to feel toxic to him, and he'd made arrangements to dissolve their business partnership. After that, I decided to meet up with him, not necessarily give him another chance, and discuss the situation further. When we met up, he promised to stop talking to Jenna and unfollowed her on all social media. As of now, he has not spoken to her in 6 months, and we've gotten back together. We actually ran into her at a concert a few weeks ago, and they didn't even say hi to each other. I feel much more respected and confident in my relationship now. TLDR, I broke up with my boyfriend. He ended his friendship/partnership with his ex, and we have gotten back together. Update 2. So, Jeff and I had been back together for about 6 months since that whole Jenna saga. Things were going surprisingly well. No weird Instagram photos, no cryptic texts, and absolutely no Jenna in the picture. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was actually starting to believe that Jeff had really cut her out of his life. We were even talking about moving in together. But of course, life loves throwing curveballs. 2 weeks ago, Jeff casually mentioned that he'd run into Jenna at a coffee shop near our place. He said it was totally random and that they just exchanged a quick hello. He downplayed it so much that I didn't even flinch at first. But something about the way he was extra chill about it left me feeling uneasy, like when you're watching a horror movie and you just know the jump scare is coming. Fast forward to last weekend, and the bomb finally drops. I was at Jeff's apartment, hanging out while he was running some errands. He asked me to grab something off his laptop, which I've never really used before. But as soon as I opened it, guess what popped up? An email chain between him and Jenna. And this wasn't just a few polite messages, they were talking about relaunching their business together. The same business he swore he dissolved. Oh, and there was an invitation to some private retreat that they were both apparently going to, alone, next weekend. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I wasn't snooping. It was literally right there in my face. But now I had this massive pit of anxiety churning inside me. I texted Jeff, asking if we could talk as soon as he got back, trying not to freak out while silently losing my mind. When he came home, I confronted him, and he froze. It was like I caught him off guard, but he tried to play it cool. He said, "I didn't tell you about the business thing because I didn't want to stress you out. It's nothing serious, just an opportunity that came up, and Jenna's a good business partner, that's all." And then, the final straw. I asked him about the retreat. That's when things got wild. Jeff admitted Jenna had reached out months ago to rekindle their friendship. Apparently, she'd been going through some personal stuff and needed a friend, and Jeff being the good guy, he has felt like he owed her support. The retreat was supposed to be her healing experience or something. He tried to spin it like he didn't think it was a big deal, and that's why he hadn't mentioned it. That's when I lost it. I told him, point blank, that this was exactly what I had warned him about. He had promised me that Jenna was out of his life, and now here he was, getting sucked right back in. It wasn't just the emails or the retreat. It was the fact that he'd kept all of this hidden. I asked him if he had any idea how disrespectful it was to plan a weekend trip with his ex behind my back, even after everything that had happened. And then, in the middle of my rant, Jeff dropped his bombshell. "You're overreacting. Jenna's been like family to me. I never cut her off. I just said what I thought you wanted to hear." Cue the dramatic silence. I couldn't believe it. All this time, I had thought we were on the same page, but apparently, he had just been telling me whatever I needed to hear to stay calm. He wasn't over her. He wasn't over their friendship. He was just managing me. Like I was some kind of jealous nuisance he had to appease so he could continue living his double life with Jenna on the side. I didn't even know what to say. I left his apartment in a daze, too stunned to cry or yell or even think. He tried to call me that night, but I didn't pick up. I needed space. Time to think. So, here's where I'm at now. I have no idea what to do. This whole situation feels like it's spiraling out of control. Part of me wants to believe Jeff really doesn't have feelings for Jenna, that he's just stupid and bad at boundaries. But another part of me is done being strung along. I don't deserve to be someone's second choice or their emotional side piece while they carry on with their ex. I haven't responded to Jeff's calls or texts since. I just need to figure out if this relationship is even worth salvaging anymore. TLDR, Jeff didn't actually cut off Jenna. He hid their renewed friendship and upcoming retreat, and I'm left wondering if I've been played this whole time. Update 3. After I posted my last update, I went completely radio silent with Jeff. I needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't about Jenna anymore. It was about Jeff. He had been lying to me for months, manipulating the situation to keep me in the dark while juggling his weird relationship with his ex. The fact that he didn't cut her off when he promised and had the audacity to plan a retreat with her behind my back was a betrayal I couldn't just ignore. So I did something I hadn't planned. I decided to meet Jenna. I know, this sounds crazy, but I needed to hear things from her side, because clearly, Jeff was never going to be honest with me. I had a gut feeling that there was more going on than I knew. So, I messaged her. I wasn't hostile. I just asked if we could meet for coffee, woman to woman. Surprisingly, she agreed. I don't know if she was curious or maybe even a little guilty, but we set a time to meet at a cafe near her office. The moment she walked in, I could tell why Jeff had been so hooked on her. She had this confident energy, like she knew exactly who she was and didn't care what anyone else thought. But there was also this weird tension in the air, like she knew things were about to get real. I didn't waste time. I laid it all out for her, how Jeff had been lying, how I felt like I was playing second fiddle to her, how the camping trips, the Instagram photos, and now the retreat were tearing my relationship apart. I asked her, flat out, "What is really going on between you two?" That's when she dropped her bombshell. Jenna told me that she and Jeff had never really broken up. Not in the way I'd thought, at least. According to her, they just shifted from being romantic partners to something more complicated. A weird in-between where they weren't technically together but still leaned on each other for everything. She admitted that she still had feelings for him, but she didn't want to get back together officially because their business partnership was too important to risk. She said their connection was deeper than just romance, whatever that means, and that she didn't see why she should have to cut him off just because I was in the picture. But here's the kicker. She had no idea Jeff had told me he'd cut her out. She thought I knew they were still close. She thought I was okay with the whole thing. I sat there, my mind racing, feeling this bizarre mix of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. Jeff had been playing both of us. He had been telling me one thing, telling her another, and keeping us apart so we wouldn't compare notes. He was living in this fantasy world where he got to have us both, me as his girlfriend and her as his emotional backup. When I told Jenna that Jeff had promised me he'd end things with her, she looked genuinely shocked and pissed. She said, "I thought he was just being distant because of work stuff. I didn't realize he was trying to keep us from talking." At that point, I was done. This wasn't some misunderstanding or bad communication. This was a straight-up, months-long manipulation by Jeff to keep us both in his life without being honest with either of us. I told Jenna she was welcome to him and that I was walking away from this mess. Honestly, I didn't care what she decided to do after that. I was done with both of them, and that's exactly what I did. I blocked Jeff on everything: phone, social media, email. I didn't even bother telling him it was over because I didn't owe him another conversation. He knew exactly what he'd done, and I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of explaining himself again. But of course, Jeff didn't let it go that easily. The next day, he showed up at my apartment unannounced, banging on the door, shouting that he needed to explain. I don't know if he'd already talked to Jenna or if he was just freaking out because he realized he'd lost control of the situation, but I wasn't having it. I opened the door long enough to tell him that we were done for good, that I knew everything, and that I wasn't interested in his excuses. And then, I said something I never thought I'd say to anyone. "You're not a victim of Jenna's feelings. You're a coward who couldn't let go of the attention." His face fell, and for the first time, he didn't have anything to say. I slammed the door in his face and never looked back. So, here I am now, single, free, and honestly, feeling better than I have in a long time. I've blocked Jeff and Jenna on everything, and I've started focusing on myself. I signed a lease for an apartment in a new city, and I'm moving next month. No more toxic relationships, no more lies, no more ex-girlfriends lurking in the background. The funny thing is, I don't even feel sad anymore. Just relieved. Like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I don't know what's going to happen with Jeff and Jenna, and frankly, I don't care. They can figure out their mess without me. TLDR, Jeff had been lying to both me and Jenna the entire time. I confronted Jenna, learned the truth, and walked away from the whole situation. I'm single, moving to a new city, and feeling better than ever.